over to you. So we've got the final award winners of last year, technology sorted, and we've actually got Professor Jenny Lawrence, Adrian Walbank and Dr Lee Fallin, who are going to be talking to us about Gen AI in teaching, learning, assessment, inclusive, ethical and sustainable innovation. I don't think they need any more introduction. I'm going to take my seat on this.
Thank you. It's good to see you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really great to see everybody here today. I'm Jenny Lawrence. I'm here with my colleague. Oh. Hello. Does that work?
That was better.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. I feel so northern when I use these though. Okay, I'll do my best.
Thank you for welcoming us here today. I'm Jenny Lawrence. I'm here with my colleague Lee. Adrian couldn't make it today because his lady love is having a baby and he's looking after her. He just couldn't quite travel. He really wants to be at home waiting for the big moment. But he will be joining us. He has a video contribution, but he has worked with us on the presentation. So our project was really a bunch of buddies coming together to solve a problem we were all facing in our institutions. So I'm sure we're all aware that there's a lot of anxiety surrounding generative AI in HE. The ability to use AI effectively is a really important graduate skill that's been identified by the World Economic Forum as far back as 2018. In 2017, the UK's industrial strategy identified AI as being absolutely transformational. And here we are in 2023-24, surprised that it's actually happening. So the thing is, we've got a really important role in HE in figuring out how we can really harness Gen AI for the common good. So at this point, I think we need to pause and really think about what is HE for. And this is the very crux of the entire project. If we consider that Humboldt, the granddaddy of the modern university, he suggested that higher education actually is about creating ethical and reasonable and responsible citizens, merchants and soldiers. I mean, the merchants and the soldiers really struck with me when I went back to the original text, but we are responsible for the next generation of citizens. If we think about UNESCO, they argue that higher education, or education more broadly, is actually about creating peace and eradicating poverty. And then all of this is mapped into institutional strategies. My institutional strategy, I'm from Oxford Brookes, specifically cites that we're in the business of creating a better and fairer world. These are really lofty ambitions. So how can we, in HE, embrace and adopt, so that's a nice phrase from Jisc, embrace and adopt Gen AI in teaching, learning and assessment when data protection laws are moving really quickly, when the tech is moving even faster, and how can we do this and meet these lofty aims? So we're going to discuss that today. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the project we're quite a big team. So we've got national teaching fellows from the University of Warwick, the University of Hull, and Oxford Brookes University. And we've also got some aspiring national teaching fellows to be involved in the project as well. And because one of our teaching fellows, Letty Gramaglia, is so utterly brilliant, she helped us go global because she's seconded to Monash more recently. Next slide, please. So let's just ground ourselves for a moment in what we're actually talking about before we get into the nitty-gritty. So, Gen AI is a rapidly developing tool with revolutionary potential. It trawls data to create text, audio and images based on previous patterns of use. It's not intelligent. Don't think it's not intelligent. It's available through specific applications like ChatGPT, which I'm sure you've all heard of, and it's increasingly embedded in everyday software. Microsoft Copilot, for example, and Google Gemini. It's speedy, it's convenient, but these applications are not unproblematic. They entrench colonial thinking, they're hidden behind paywalls, they use dominating discourses to create artefacts that can be hallucinations because they're incorrect, so it's unreliable, it's resource intensive, and so it's not environmentally sustainable, and even worse, it is morally naive. Next slide, please. Okay, so Adrian is going to talk to us now about HE sector context and concerns. Sense of jeopardy, isn't it exciting?
Hello everyone, and apologies that I couldn't be with you today. On this slide I'm going to briefly summarise and articulate some of the main contextual factors and concerns surrounding the advent of generative AI. If you recall, when generative AI first burst onto the scene, most famously with ChatGPT of course, the main concerns seem to centre around academic integrity, the extent to which students may be using generative AI to effectively cheat, and of course the extent to which ourselves as practitioners could actually measure or ascertain the extent to which students were actually using generative AI. And as we all remember, Turnitin responded to this fairly quickly by attempting to come up with an algorithm and a generative AI to essentially battle generative AI and identify generative AI to give us a way of actually identifying it or not. And that was proven to be not particularly successful. And then in response to that, the terrain generally shifted to more of an embrace and adapt approach. But one thing that's really worth considering as we kind of entered into that is the extent to which digital poverty is actually still a thing. And sometimes we do assume, of course, that our students are digitally savvy, and that might not actually be the case. And obviously, as Illingsworth has commented, you know, the advent of generative AI does actually raise concerns about fair and equal access. But it's not just fair and equal access to the technologies and to generative AI that's at stake here, of course. As I've talked about elsewhere, generative AI is issued in a new mode of doing research, so students doing their assignments or even just learning need now not only key academic skills in the form of reading skills, critical thinking skills, and that sort of thing that we've taught for many, many years, but also prompt engineering. In many respects, generative AI has shown that in some respects you only get out of it what you put into it. So the key is effective prompts, first of all, but also the development of academic literacies, particularly critical thinking skills. Later on, I've commented, and the UNESCO report that's on the slide there also commented on the extent to which students using generative AI, it actually to a certain extent undermines student autonomy, student agency, and UNESCO was worried initially about the extent to which it undermined the development of intellectual skills. Because essentially, in some respects, you know, students, and even if we're using generative AI, we're to a certain extent outsourcing some of the work that we do and the generative aspects of writing or production of visuals and images. So there were concerns initially raised about that. And in an era of neoliberalism and massification of higher education, I raised concerns about the extent to which it actually is, to a certain extent, dehumanising and erodes student agency. Some of these initial voices, of course, my own included, were a little negative and in some respects a natural reaction to a disruptive technology. More interestingly and more recently, of course, the move has been not only to embrace and adapt, but the extent to which generative AI affords us the opportunity to actually not replace intellectual skills, but to develop academic skills and intellectual skills, providing, of course, that the intellectual and mental schemas and architectures are actually put in place. So one of the things that I would argue here is actually in harnessing generative AI, we need actually for it to be effectively scaffolded within our teaching and pedagogy. And then of course there are issues of digital security. We mustn't forget, of course, that everything that we put into generative AI is in some respects harvested and is not necessarily secure. Many thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentation and some of the pearls and case studies that we've got coming up.
Okay. A quick note on that last point with regards to digital security. It depends on the application, it depends on your licensing with the application, and that licensing and that application and that agreement can change over time. And that is something that we are really mindful when we're using GenAI in teaching, learning and assessment, and that we've learned and have embedded into our collection and the work that we've done with this project. Next slide, please. Okay, so you can see we're dealing with something fast-moving, complicated, quite exciting, but equally tricky. So we're all dealing with it in our separate institutions, so we got together to make this suggestion to the ANTF Collaboration Fund. We're working, and we're actually just moving into production for these assets in compiling an index of innovation advice. We've called these Pearls of Practical Wisdom. 10 case studies based on actual practice in using GenAI in teaching, learning and assessment, and a practical guide on how to use GenAI in teaching, learning and assessment innovation. Okay, thinking... Do you like my old school style that I have my notes written in pen on a piece of paper while I'm talking about fast-moving technology? Fails safe. Okay, so let's think for a moment about the pearls of practical wisdom. Now, this is a little bit of a riff on bell hooks. Anybody who's worked with me knows that bell hooks is she's my queen. She talks about when you're working in academic and educational development, you have to think about the exhausted faculty member whose cognitive load, they're absolutely full. Their cognitive load is at its overspilling. So any guidance that you offer needs to be accessible. It's also recognising the understanding that from a little bit of a gritty irritant, a great jewel can be born. So these pearls of practical wisdom are just very brief, kind of 50-word nuggets, jewels of advice and guidance from practitioners from right across the globe in how they have used and what they have learned in using GenAI in teaching, learning and assessment. So this has been edited by Isabel Fisher, who's at Warwick, and she's worked on this with Letty from Aglia, who is at Monash right now, and they work together with a student partner, Hazel Tainter, who's at Oxford Brookes. So it's a nice collaborative effort. They opened a call and they had a selection panel. I think the call procured about 50 or 60 submissions. From those we've selected 28 based on their efficacy, their scalability and their relevance to different disciplines and contexts. And we've organised these pearls into 3 areas. AI integration into education, foundations in prompting. Prompting is a really important skill, and examples of specific applications. Now, I'm aware that the examples of specific applications, that's going to move pretty quickly. If I was to read any advice about web-based learning, and there was advice on how to use Ask Jeeves, I might think it was a bit dated. That's going to happen with GenAI. However, feedback from colleagues that submitted the pearls, and also in consultation with our learning communities, we recognised colleagues would like to know about how to use specific tools, because there is so much out there. Okay? Over to you.
I think the practical nature of those pearls really lends to some of those tools cropping up. And we were quite surprised actually, because we thought we might have been inundated. You know, a 50-word pearl and nugget is actually quite difficult to write when you try. And what I have behind me here are 3 examples of pearls that will be in our final collection. And rather than read these to you, I will let, see you're already doing it now, I will let you read these pearls as an example. So as you can see from the 3 pearls here, the first one really does focus on prioritising inclusivity, the second one on fostering a participatory environment, and the last one on student voice. And that's these are really good representation of our whole collection. Each of them has a really salient point, and we wanted to make a really accessible resource. I think one of the nice things about the collection of pearls, and obviously the case studies which we'll get onto next, is that they're about practical, real use. And a lot of the things that we've seen have been fear-mongering philosophy and concern about this existential crisis and what AI means. And what we've been able to do in this collection is actually start to ground it in real life and come up with, what's happening. And I think at that point it's a really nice time to hand over to Jenny to introduce our case study approach.
Thank you. So the notion of the case studies is that, as they described, they are practical examples. So these are a little bit more in depth, but they're still easy to parse, about between 500 and 800 words long. So Professor Mary Davis, she is an aspiring ANTF, has edited the case studies. I don't know if you know Mary Davis, she's very much interested in the ethical and inclusive development of academic integrity. And so she's really changing the attitudes to academic integrity for it to be actually a nurturing and developmental exercise rather than just taking a merely punitive approach. So she put together a method that was very robust. We put together a review team, again with our student collaborator was on board, who added a really interesting perspective to the exercise. We had an open call. Again, we had quite a lot of submissions. I think we had 40 submissions for the case studies, of which we selected 10. Now, the criteria were, bear with me, the ethical use of AI, originality, accessibility, inclusivity, scalability, and evident benefit. We wanted to include sustainability, either environmental sustainability, mindful of the amount of resource the servers use in AI, or financial sustainability, mindful that we need to, if you're using GenAI in a module, it has to be available to the student, not just for while they're at that module, but if they're doing a retake, or if they have a break and they want to come back to their studies. So it needs to be available for a good couple of years. However, we didn't get any submissions that covered that in a way that was adequate, so we couldn't include that. So there's a real gap in the knowledge there, I think, that we need to address. It's moving so quickly, it's quite hard to pin down. Okay, so the method, we deployed a methodology that I've used with Advanced HE recently, which when we compiled a collection of case studies on the strategic use of the PSF in teaching and learning, we pulled together writing retreats for the authors. These writing retreats were fantastic. The feedback from them was absolutely phenomenal. A lot of the authors were first-time authors. All of the case studies were co-created by 1 or 2 members of staff and 1 or 2 students. So for them working together, writing about teaching and learning innovation was a really new endeavour. So the writing retreat was a really nice nurturing approach to steer them through that process. The structure of the case studies, nice and brief, 800 words, following the STAR model. So that's what's the situation, task, action, result, and each one includes a stakeholder commentary. What was the impact? How was it valued by the people actually involved? And we've got authors from France, UK, Australia and Vietnam, covering disciplines as diverse as education, politics, medical and healthcare, engineering, hotel management and modern languages. So it's a really nice mix, and they're just great, aren't they?
Oh,
just great.
Phenomenal.
Yes, fantastic.
Phenomenal.
Okay, over to you.
So you'll notice my name's not there. I've not curated these case studies or the pearls. I've been part of the team that's analysing them and is working towards understanding and making sense of them. You kind of get my fresh reaction because I did my analysis on the train down here yesterday of all of these case studies. And it was so incredibly refreshing to have a data set where everything's structured in the same way. That STAR model is absolutely phenomenal for you to be able to accessibly approach these case studies. And the amount that they're able to convey in 800 words is absolutely phenomenal. I'm really excited for you to see some case studies, and we'll put them on and we'll have a look in a second. But before we do that, I just wanted to identify some of those kind of like key emerging themes that we're identifying. So it clearly presents an opportunity for staff to work differently. And I think what the wonderful thing about this case study collection is that every single one of them presents a different opportunity for the way that students have worked with staff. And it's incredibly powerful that these case studies have been co-authored by students and staff as well. And so we're seeing that combination of staff and student voice coming through in these. And I think it makes them a really accessible read as well. They're not very technical, and it gives us that, I mean, they do quite often mention tools. That's unavoidable, but the principles from them are very, very transparent. The second thing that we've got here is the opportunity for them to, for students to gain practice. There's some wonderful, there's a couple of case studies that look at it in a kind of clinical context. And it's really nice to see that disciplinary lens coming through, that suggestion that actually, if we're going to give counselling students practice, maybe it's more ethical to get them to practice with a chatbot before we loose them on people. So it's really nice to see those kind of angles come through from that. The one that fascinates me the most is the one set in the hospitality higher education provision in France. It's so specific, it's a context I've never come across before, and I've learned so much from that as well. There's a wonderful story about how conservative the hotel and hospitality industry is, and the juxtaposition of AI coming along is really interesting. And then finally, this idea of scalable. And it's so nice to see every single one of those case studies reflect on that scalability in some way. And that's really, really come through. So, have a go, have a read. This QR code here will take you through to a Padlet. That Padlet has a link to 3 of those case studies. Now, we have not published these yet, so you've got exclusive access. We are asking, please do not distribute or tweet or share that link. We're looking forward to launching these. I'll let Jenny explain when and how later. But for now, have a look at them. If you want, when you click on one of those case studies, you'll see in Padlet you can add a comment beneath. There's also the opportunity to add comments down the side. So rather than us stand here and read an 800 words case study to you, I'll give you some time to do that yourself. So choose one of those case studies. If you're a quick read, you might get through 2 or 3 of them. And you'll see there's something at the bottom that says add your own pearl. Just pause that for now. We'll come to that in the next slide. So for now, choose a case study, have a look through, and if you want to add any comments, give us any feedback, add your own reflections, we will really look forward to seeing them pop up in the Padlet. So hopefully you're familiar with Padlet, but when you get in here you can see we've got our 3 case studies along, and if you click on one of those it will bring it up for you, and you've got the option over here to add comments if you want.
Okay. Let's bring you out of your thought bubble. That was like, it feels really intense. I can feel the concentration vibrating. It's wonderful. At this stage of the conference, we must all be shattered and overstimulated, and we're all thinking really hard.
I feel a little bit like we just set you all an exam. We're into exam conditions. And I feel like I just stepped back in time. So let's try and bring some of that more fun and creativity back in. So if you scroll down on that Padlet, you will see you can add your own pearl at the bottom here. So you can feel free to add them as a comment, or click on the plus down here and add your own pin and add your pearl at the bottom. And just to explain what the rationale here is, obviously we have our curated collection of pearls, but these nuggets of wisdom are a journey, aren't they? They're just going to keep coming all of the time. And what Jenny and I have decided to do is we want to write a blog reflecting on this conference. And it would be really nice if you wanted to add any pearls to that. So again, same QR code, same Padlet. If you yourself want to contribute a pearl to go alongside our blog post, please include your name and institution if you'd like to be acknowledged. You can continue to do this while Jenny and I continue to talk and introduce what we've been doing a little bit more. But those pearls are like a dialogue, aren't they? The irritants of AI will continue to generate those pearls of practice as we go through. So please take the opportunity to add your own. And I gave you an example, so the one at the bottom is one that I wrote around using a chatbot to help coach students through searching. So continue that journey, and again, you really want to think of that focus around sustainable, ethical and inclusive. And we've got many definitions of sustainable, but I think one of the most important ones is thinking about how we do this in a way where the technology is going to still be there tomorrow. There's some real big questions that we've got around sustainability if we get people to use free tools. You know, if I got you all now to choose ChatGPT and I forced you to use the free version, I'm basically making you all give your labour to OpenAI to train its model further. So there's some real big questions and issues around that. And that's a nice segue over to Jenny.
It's like we know what we're doing. Okay, so while you're thinking about that, and let's reflect for a moment about the safe and ethical use of GenAI. We've come to some guiding questions that we're advising our students and staff to consider in their use of GenAI in teaching, learning and assessment. So I've written these for the university, Brookes University, which is where I work, and I've written those with Patrick Forrest, who is our head of data security and information and data security, who is a man who is very relaxed for somebody in his position, I have to say. Martha O'Curry, who's our head of the Student Centre for Academic Development, and Charlie Simpson, all-round superhero and sports scientist. So we came up with some questions to help staff and students understand when and how to use GenAI, and we've adopted them for this specific open educational resource. So I won't go through them line by line now, but do feel free to refer to them. We will be publishing these very soon. So this is essentially, rather than giving really clear guidance and instructions, like actual, a point of what to do, just key questions to ask yourself that will help you keep on top of an emerging and ever-changing terrain. Okay, delights and demands. We're going to reflect just for a moment on the actual project and what it's been like for us working on a multi-institutional, international, multidisciplinary, cross-service project. £5,000, man. Have you got your B4M? Have you got your B4M? As is often the case with educational development projects, the funding is very small, but what you get from it is priceless. And we've had such a great time together. It's been such a treat. My job is so demanding, and it just grows and grows and grows. Honestly, it's like they're trying to kill me. I work so hard. And this has been my Friday morning treat. This and working with Public Silbex on an edition on looking at Gen AI in teaching, learning and assessment. It's been such a treat. We've learned loads together. It's been CPD for every member of the team, from the student who is now speaking at events at Oxford Brookes with some confidence about Gen AI, to our head of data security, who didn't even realise he was going to get involved, but has been absolutely pivotal, to Lee and myself. We've learned new skills. Mary's never run a writing retreat before, and now she can't wait to get stuck in, so she's going to be offering some for us in a cave next year. We have not only developed, but developed our, for the institution and for the sector, but for our own new knowledge, which has been really useful in our practice. And this is informing our institutional response to this really important technology. It's expanded our horizons, working with different nations in the collection of the case study, and the collaborations made for increased group capacity and reduced workload. We've achieved this around all of us having very demanding, very time-consuming jobs. We've done it around the edges, and we're nearly done. We're just pushing into production. We've got our principles and practice. Principles and practice are almost ready to pull together. The website is in construction as we speak, and we'll be publishing in just a few weeks in June. Actually, a few weeks is due. It isn't in a few weeks. It's just like 8 weeks. But you know how time moves in HE, moves at very fast. So have I reached any delights, Lee? Any delights from your perspective?
I would just say, you know, on that personal note, as an aspiring ANTF, it's really nice, because I would have never been here today if it wasn't for that project. And it was a lovely opportunity to meet new people who were also going through that journey as well. And I really appreciate that. And I'm actually on a personal note, because Jenny used to work at Hull as well. It's been really nice to reconnect and forge that. I think the most difficult thing we had on Monday morning was deciding who did the delights and who did the demands, and I got the demand list, and there were many challenges. Ethical clearance was definitely wrong, particularly with Oxford Brookes standards. It was a very rigorous process. Getting data and processing agreements signed by all institutions, very time consuming, especially for a small pot of money. I spent my first 10 professional years in higher education working in a library, so I was raised by librarians, so things like copyright and publishing were very much in the fore. So it enabled us to think through things like Creative Commons licensing right at the start as to how we would license these and get all those things tidied up. I think the biggest thing that we hadn't expected was the time zones. The kind of international appeal of this did throw some curveballs, and so we ended up having to do retreats in multiple time zones. And I mean, some of those participants were so phenomenally up for it. I think they would have stayed up till midnight to do it, but we were able to find something that worked for everybody, which worked really well. As Jenny suggested, time is so difficult. And on that topic, we need to get on to the next slide, because time is also flying here.
Okay, launch of our open educational resource. Now that we've told you how great it is, how absolutely pivotal and life-changing it's going to be for you in the sector, practicing in teaching and learning and having to embrace and adapt to Gen AI, we'll be launching the case studies and the pearls at the Brookes annual Teaching and Learning Conference on the 19th of June. So the conference is Academic Ambition for Social Justice, the challenges and possibilities of leading authentic change in HE. So this conference is really geared towards how we are changing the world and doing real good, and that is its own reward. And I think that's a really important thing for us to be talking about right now. It's tough. It's tough in HE right now. So that's when we're going to be publishing the first phase, and I will be disseminating the link for registration at the event in due course. And then we're going to be publishing the guidance at Lee's Host University conference, Integrating Educational Thinking, on the 10th of July. So I think that's everything. If we've got time for
Just
just
3 minutes.
3 minutes, and that's a lot. Any questions?
We're still looking at cases.
Still writing your pearls. We'll be checking those through the day, and we'll close the Pavletic down I think tomorrow. We'll close the play tomorrow.
Can we really thank the presenters